To me, just my opinion, the Ouija board is inherently evil. When I was in my early teens, I had 2 encounters with the game. Game, hardly. My dad and mom bought me one for Christmas. And I got my sister and brother to try to work it with me, but we were not serious, and it quite likely ended up in the trash. I don't remember what happened to it. But about the same time, I had a very eerie encounter. On Shreve Drive, where I grew up in Bridgeport, Michigan, was an old abandoned house. Eventually, the Bridgeport Community Church bought the property that the house was on, tore it down, and made additional parking space. As I remember, the house had been occupied by a very old woman, but I only remember it being deserted. The garage next to the house was filled with odds and ends that had accumulated through the years, and everything was scattered helter-skelter in there. I hated even to walk past there. The garage gave me a very weird feeling, as though something very bad had once taken place there. That's why it surprises me that one warm afternoon, I garnered enough nerve to go into that garage. I was in hopes that I might find some old books or comic books to add to my collection, which was pretty huge at that time. Lying amongst the debris was a planchette from an Ouija board, but it looked very, very old. It was made out of wood. The whole time I was in that garage, I was having chills despite the warmth and the overwhelming feeling that I was not alone and I was being watched. I picked up that planchette, had a sudden burst of panic and fear, threw it down, and ran out, never to return to that garage. Now, I asked about that deserted old house, who lived there, how long it had been vacant. All I ever found out is that, again, an old woman had lived there. There was a lot of trouble came into my life after that, and I wonder in retrospect if it was caused by my contact with that planchette. How did the Ouija board come to be in the first place? It has an interesting history. In the 1890s, the late Victorian era, spiritualism became of great interest. It was during that craze that someone came up with a new tool for communicating with the dead. Understand that the Holy Word of God, the Bible, forbids such communication. Anyways, that new tool was a small piece of wood called the planchette. The Victorian men and women, in their prim and proper garb, would gather around a table, place their hands on the planchette, and watch how it moved. Some planchettes had a pencil attached to them that would actually write out a message, while others pointed at letters, numbers, and words that were painted on the table and spelled out messages in that way. Curiously, no one could or was able to explain why the planchette moved. Of course, those who were skeptical explained that the people touching the planchette were actually making it move. Those who truly believed in the device's ability insisted that it was spirits that made the planchette move. As with all fads, there were people who wanted to cash in, and in this case, that was William and Isaac Fuld. They thought the whole thing was a bunch of hooey, but saw an opportunity there. They owned a toy company in Maryland and thought that the planchette would make a great game. They took a board the size of a cafeteria tray, painted the letters of the alphabet across the middle and the numbers 0 through 9 underneath, and the words yes and no were also included on the board. Across the bottom was the word goodbye. How did it get its curious name, Ouija? It was a combination of the French word oi, O-U-I, and the German word ja. William and Isaac Fuld published their Ouija board talking board and patented it in 1892. In World War I, the talking board's popularity soared. There is a legend as follows. Just before war broke out, William Fuld's favorite Ouija board told him to prepare for big business. Due to that instruction, he expanded production, and to be sure, during the war, people began using the board in order to stay in touch with loved ones who went into battle. After all, cell phones were many, many, many decades off. But sales skyrocketed and the money poured in. History shows that in times of great national or world stress, sales boomed and then decreased when conditions improved. Interestingly, when World War I began, the IRS collected 10% tax on every single board game sold in the United States. The Fulds were determined to find a way out of paying that tax. So they declared the Ouija board to be a scientific instrument that should be exempt from the tax. While they ultimately lost, they fought the case all the way to the United States Supreme Court. In attempting to explain how the planchette works, one reasonable theory is that it works through an ideomotor action, much in the way a dowsing rod can detect water. Unconsciously, picturing what you want to have happen causes a person's muscles to make it happen. People think they are not doing anything and that some outside force makes the movement take place. There are, however, many disturbing tales of both contact and possession whilst using the mystical Ouija board. Let's take a brief look at a few of them. The following story is said to be true and concerns a housewife named Pearl Curran of St. Louis, Missouri, and her story is extraordinary to say the least. She began playing with the Ouija board in 1913 when it is told the planchette began moving around the board with great strength. It is said to have spelled out the following message: "Many moons ago I lived, again I come. Patience Worth is my name." The entity identified itself as a woman who had been born in 1625 in Dorsetshire, England, and had migrated to New England, where she claimed to have been murdered by an Indian. According to Curran, over the following 6 years, the spirit of Patience Worth gave her poems, aphorisms, and other works through the Ouija board. In his book, Fads, Follies, and Illusions of the American People, Paul Sand wrote, "Between 1913 and 1919, the pent-up patience transmitted to Curran no less than 1,500,000 pearls of wisdom, heavy with moral and religious dissertations, garnished with 2,000 items of blank verse and 6 novels." Mrs. Curran said that in one busy 10-day stretch alone, her whirling planchette recorded 30,000 words. And she said she could take 2,000 words an hour off the board when both she and the virginal Puritan were on the right wavelength, end quote. Her story was made more believable by the fact that she had no formal training as a writer, and the prose she produced, surprisingly, were very well done using antiquated languages. The writing she produced was far beyond what she was capable of producing because she had no formal training. No matter how you cut it, hers was an extraordinary case. Some people became so committed to what their board instructed them to do, even to murder. Case in point is that of 15-year-old Maddie Turley, who in the early 1930s murdered her father with a shotgun with the help of her mother. In 1932, 77-year-old railroad worker Herbert Hurd killed his wife after their Ouija board falsely accused him of having an affair. And in 1956, wealthy Connecticut woman Helen Dow Peck left nearly her entire $178,000 estate to John Gale Forbes, a name her Ouija board spelled out for her. However, a court-ordered search failed to turn up a single man by that name in the entire United States of America. There are many more reports of horrendous happenings after use of the Ouija board. It is a device known to be able to open portals to a spiritual dimension that is better left closed. Well, I hope you enjoyed the program. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss out on a single new program on my favorite channel, the Dennis Morrison channel. God bless and have a great day.